Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I am with John Priest, the senior winemaker and GM of Etude Winery. John, welcome to Wine Soundtrack, and tell us about Etude.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Etude is in Carneros. We're one of the first wineries that really started, really predated Carneros. We started in 1982, and the AVA was founded in 1983. So really focused on Pinot Noir all that time. I think we've been really specialized in it. Wonderful Cabernets as well, so we can't forget that. But Pinot Noir is really why we're here today.
Wow.
Yeah.
So are you 100% estate, and how many acres do you own?
So we have an estate, which is quite a large property. It's a very Grace Benoit Ranch. It's beautiful. It's up in the hills between Sonoma and Petaluma. And 2/3 of the ranch is unplanted and full of wildlife and forests and creeks. And it really is like a little nature preserve. And then the other third is planted with these small little vineyards dotted around. So that's quite beautiful. It's a Grace Benoit Ranch. So that's our estate, and we have a line of wines that comes specifically from that ranch. But then we do also have grower fruit, particularly our Cabernet.
I was going to say, because Pinot and Cab don't always grow in the exact same place.
Yeah, but you think about where we are in Napa, it's just really an ideal place to be able to do both, because, particularly located where we are down in the south end of Napa Valley, turn right and you're in Carneros, which is a perfect cool climate for Pinot Noir. Turn left and you're up in Napa Valley, which is the best place in the world for Cabernet Sauvignon. So it really is the kind of location that gives us the opportunity to do that.
Amazing. So what's your total case production?
We vary, 35 to 40,000 cases. A lot of that is small individual bottlings from single vineyards or single appellations. And then our main wine is our Carneros estate, Grace Benoit Pinot Noir, and that is the one you just see more, nationally distributed. Yeah.
So that wine is nationally distributed, and your other wines, are they nationally distributed? Are they in multiple markets, or is it more direct to consumer?
We have some wines that are nationally distributed. We have quite a few that are direct to consumer as well, and we have a very healthy direct to consumer program.
So I'm curious, John, for you, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a good question. I like that. Which is really fun because I flashed to my first memory just as you asked it. I grew up in San Luis Obispo, about a block and a half away from the mission that was planted in 1772. And in our backyard, this house that was built in the late to 1800s, was a grape arbor. And those grape vines, allegedly, had come from the mission. So they were mission grapes. They tasted delicious. And my father attempted to make wine. And when I say attempted, it wasn't very good. And even though I was too young to really know what was good or bad.
You didn't like it.
It wasn't good. But it captured my imagination about the fermentation and seeing the little cap on the barrel that he would use and the aromas and everything, I think really intrigued me. So I always think that had something that captured me early on.
Wow. So obviously you're not a little boy with mission grapes growing in the backyard anymore, and you've had the privilege as a winemaker and just as an adult to drink lots of great wines. Is there one particular wine that was one of those aha moments? And you're nodding, so I'm curious what it was. When did you get to have it, and what wine was it?
Well, it's funny. We're sitting here in Santa Barbara, and right out of college, I worked down here. I lived in Santa Barbara, and I worked at the Wine Cask. And it was my finishing school for wine appreciation, for all the vast amount of wine that we would open on a nightly basis. I really had a chance to learn about the world of wine and develop a palate, really. And I all of a sudden decided that I liked Burgundy. And it was a bottle
just an all of a sudden thing.
All of a sudden. I was way too young to know better. But it was a bottle of 1985 Mayo Camazé Au Bordeaux that was my aha wine. It's like, I like Pinot Noir. And that honestly set me on the path to really explore the grape, understand it in Burgundy and study it. And, there was things happening in Santa Barbara County with Pinot Noir back then. So it gave me a chance to really kind of study it. And here I am at Etude. So there you go.
So if we were to come into your home, into your cellar or refrigerator or closet, or in the winery where you probably had some bottles, what would we find? Is it pretty much domestic? Is it your own wines? Is it a smattering from around the world or a particular region?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a bit eclectic, you would imagine. Being a winemaker and having lots of friends in the industry, there's a lot of trading and bartering going around, so quite a bit of domestic. What I tend to gravitate to is import, is European wines. I drink a lot of Sicilian wine, to be honest. I really like that. I just love it. Beaujolais, you'll find some Sophie Dubois in my wine fridge, and I have a fair amount of older Burgundy that's just getting better and better every year.
So is there something from your cellar, or perhaps not from your cellar, you picked up the other day, that you drank recently, that just drank really well, that stood out in your mind?
Let's see. That's a really good question. I can't even remember the producer, to be honest, but it was a great, Grand Cru Chablis. And the producer is actually completely blanking, but it was 2013, and it was really, honestly, at its peak. And it was just really, really delicious.
Yum.
Yeah.
Yum. So you fell in love with Pinot Noir, and you make Pinot Noir, but you also make Cabernet. So I'm wondering, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
Oh boy, perfect in what way? That really is a really tough question to answer. Perfect as in, does it behave in the winery and is easy to make? Or does it bring you this sort of allure and the challenge of it? Makes you work and think and, use your intuition. So I think, maybe people would think that Pinot Noir is a difficult grape and challenging, but I think it's the perfect grape because you really have to focus in the vineyard. It has to come from the right place. It has to have that expression of that terroir, and it's one of the very few grapes that really will express that one place. And then you have to be very caring in the cellar and treat it with respect and dignity and gently to be able to get all the nuance that you want out of it. So, yeah, maybe one of the tougher grapes to grow and to make, but I think that's probably perfect. Maybe not the easiest, but...
But no one ever said perfection was easy.
Well, I think that's right. I think that it requires that challenge, that study, that practice of the mastercraft. That every year and every vintage is going to be a different story, and we want to be able to express that.
Oh, keep that thought in mind. So, you work for a larger brand. You've been working in the wine industry a long time, and you know the challenges of selling wine, and you make a lot of wine. So I'm curious what your opinion is on wine critics and scores.
Well, I think wine critics who really pay a lot of attention to the story of what we're doing, and try to understand the whole intent and our ethos. I think those are the critics that really are the most respected. It isn't just about their ego. It's really about telling a story and really trying to illustrate that and express that to their readership. And so I really think that they have a place. I read critics, I really, I don't know everything about wine around the world.
What?
And I want to I have certain critics that I really respect and understand their palate. And I think that's really important. They can portray, that information. Scores, I think it's a measure of being able to kind of have a scale. Chasing scores is tough. I'm always happy when we get good scores, and we do. That's really nice. My dad said once, take your cookies when they're passed. That plate might not come back around. So always happy to get them.
So you like getting good scores, but you're not making wine with the intention of a score.
Not really. We have a level of quality that we have a standard ourselves that is reflected in the critical review that we get.
So as a wine drinker, you yourself, scores be damned. Red, white, or rosé?
Well, that depends on the day and the mood, I suppose. I don't know if I can, a very inclusive wine drinker.
Still or sparkling?
Sparkling.
Champagne or domestic or somewhere else?
Well, I love champagne, and I love grower-producer champagne. And, it really inspired me to find the right grapes on our estate to make what our version of a grower-producer champagne would be. So we're growing these grapes. It's a small quantity. But it is meant to express that place, much like you would see in champagne. I love that. I'm not saying we're making champagne, but it has that a little tip of the hat to that.
I plan on tasting that when we're finished here. So, we follow a lot of rules. People follow scores to buy wine. They want to hear what winemakers have to say, what people tell. What do you think about pairing food and wine? Do you think there are rules to follow, or do you think it should just be like drink what you want and eat what you want?
I really say that there are no rules. There are definitely some things that don't go well together, and I think that finding those pairings and experimenting. I mean, corks are made for pulling. Pull a cork, try it. If it didn't work, well, try something else next time. But I really, I don't think that it should be dogmatic. I really, and maybe I say that as a Pinot Noir producer and lover, because Pinot Noir goes with so many different things.
Very true.
I don't know if you'd want a big, heavy cab with some Dover sole. I think, there's some common sense that goes along with this.
Absolutely.
But if that's what you like, drink it.
Yeah. And that's true, because you would normally think of Dover sole as going with white wine, but try a Pinot with it.
Yeah.
And you might be surprised. Maybe it works.
Yeah. Sometimes, depending on the dish, if there's a lot of butter in that dish, if it's a Pinot Noir that has really brisk acidity, it's going to pair well.
So for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure to taste Etude wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
Well, I think they're missing out on an expression of our place, our terroir, our little piece of the world, because that's the intent. That's the way we try to grow our wine. We call ourselves wine growers rather than winemakers. The winemaking in the cellar should just be very light-handed and really bring all of that potential out from the vineyard. So we think we have some pretty special vineyards. And we want to be able to express that and share that with everybody. So if you want to taste what the Grace Benoit vineyard tastes like, or the ranch, we have a wine. We also have 4 single vineyard wines off of that one ranch. So they all have very similar in character. You can hear the accent from the neighborhood, but they're all very different because there might be a different soil type or a different slope. And to really find that expression of terroir. So, it gives you a chance to maybe study Pinot Noir.
So if space aliens were to land on your property right now, which of your wines would you want to welcome them with?
Well, I always think, introducing them to Etude would be our Pinot Gris.
Really?
Yeah. It's a wonderfully expressive wine. It's aromatic, where Pinot Gris cannot always be very aromatic. It's crisp, it's light. It really expresses our winemaking philosophy, wine growing philosophy, kind of in a glass. And it's a great place to start, because that won't be their last glass. It's just the first glass.
That's right. They're going to be so engaged, they're going to say more. Yeah. So you've been doing this for a little while.
Couple years.
Couple years. Do you look for, are there any signs or predictors or omens that are, omens don't sound very positive, but is there anything that kind of triggers a warning or an awareness of what to look forward to, what a vintage is going to give you?
Yeah, well, climate change is a real thing, and we're having to really think about what that means to us in the future. And it doesn't mean necessarily your area is going to be warmer, but it might be windier. You might have more extremes, more extreme cool, but also more extreme heat. So we're very cognizant of how we grow the grapes and how resilient our grapes are, how living the soil can be, so that we can kind of weather through this, so to speak. Also really kind of gives us some clues about where we plant and what we plant. Certain varieties may not be appropriate. In 30 years, is Napa Valley going to be the best place for Cabernet?
Who knows?
I don't know, but I think it's a real question. So we have to really think in the future about the modeling, about, what we think might happen, and try to anticipate that.
So we know that every vintage tells a different story. And as you just said, it's changing. It might be slight every year, but as you look back, you see more grandiose change happening. Do you think that there's more variation from vintage to vintage, or do you find more commonality?
I used to say that we didn't really have much variation in California, but we're definitely seeing that. There are, and it could just be, that climate throughout the growing season, whether it was a warm and dry season, or if we had a lot of rain, it was more normal. Yeah, I mean, we start thinking about this early on. You know, the first rainstorm in December, you're like, okay, what kind of year are we going to get?
Exactly. Those are your omens and predictors there.
There you go.
So have you established any good luck rituals to start out your harvest, to kind of step with the right foot forward?
Oh, that's
Or
funny.
the left foot.
Or the left foot. Well, I think it's, you know, those first days where I'm getting up at 3:30 in the morning to be out in the vineyard and to see the sunrise in the vineyard. Look, I don't do that all year round, but as the harvest is beginning and we're starting to think about picking grapes, seeing the sunrise across the vineyard is something, you know, it's on, it's go time, and it actually is really it's a beautiful moment.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh. So speaking of being in the vineyards and watching the sunrise, okay, so you don't see the sunrise every day, but I'm sure throughout the season you spend time walking through the vineyards. So I'm curious, are you known for talking to your vines? Do you have a conversation with them? Do you speak to them, or am I just crazy asking that question? And then does that also translate into the winery when they're in the barrel? I mean, do you have is there an intimacy between you and the wine?
Yeah, there is. I don't know that I've talked to the vines, but I listen. I'm really listening to all of those clues, all of the nuances. You know, how much wind we're getting. You know, how dry they might be. How much water they might need. You know, how the fruit is growing. I can tell. You should be able to tell early on. You know, what the flavor of the grapes are going to be like, the tannin quality and such, the acidity. All those things you're listening. You're trying to really get those clues. Listen not only to the vines, but the nature around them. And then, you know, even in the winery, I often tell young winemakers, the wine will tell you what it wants and what it needs. And rather than trying to imply your decision making and your influence, I have to do something, you have to really listen to the wine. And it really, it teaches you humility. For sure.
Well, so while the grapes are giving you a lot of humility, I'm curious, did you always want to be a winemaker, or what did you want to be when you were a little kid?
I had no idea you could be a winemaker, even through college. Yeah, no, my dad was an architect, and I thought that would be a really fun thing to do. I really didn't like math. But it turns out winemaking is like architecture. There's history, there's craftsmanship, there's study, there's science, there's design, with a lot less math.
Just a lot more science.
Yeah, there's a lot more science, but it really is craftsmanship. I think of myself more as a craftsman than I do a scientist.
I like that. And you're right. Wine is history. It is a science. It is an art. It's a whole blend of those things. So when you're not making wine, how do you like to spend your free time?
Yeah, I love fishing. Yeah,
really.
I love big fly fisherman, and I'm either tying flies or thinking about when the season opens where I can be fishing. Even when I travel with fly rods and looking for that water that might have some action in it, and that's a lot of fun. I joked for a while that I chose to make Pinot Noir in areas where there was good fishing. So not only do we do Carneros, but I also make a wine from a vineyard up in Oregon. So always easy to hit the Deschutes River, a little bit of a drive. For a while I was making a Pinot Noir in New Zealand, arguably for the brown trout.
But we know what drives your winemaking.
Maybe Patagonia's next.
So, I just had the pleasure of meeting your fiancé. I'm curious, what sort of wines set a romantic evening for the two of you? Like, what kind of things do you want to open, or would she want you to open?
We're kind of big Beaujolais fans, I have to say. Yeah, Dutrève and Sophie Dubois. I mean, we have some real favorites. And probably a really nice Fleury would just set a nice romantic tone for the evening.
I love that. Beaujolais. So when you look back at your life, we are given advice from our parents, from our teachers, from mentors and things like that. Is there a piece of advice that has really stuck out as something that you take with you on a daily basis, or, as in your work?
Yeah, I did have a mentor early on in winemaking who said, "You're only as good as your last bottle of wine," which was, is really telling. There's a lot to that statement. It's like, if people don't like your wine, they're not going to buy it. And, the winemaking is the easy part. You have to sell it, and you want people to enjoy it. And the whole idea is people enjoy it and bring it into their home. So, that's just that focus on quality, that focus on dependability, I think, was a real important statement.
And if you could give a piece of advice to our listeners today, what kind of advice would you want to share?
Sit back and enjoy your glass of wine. I mean, just enjoy it. And there's a lot of, let us do the hard work of, all of the science that you're talking about, all of that study. But just, try to find the story from that wine in the glass of wine.
Yeah. And so, I'm thinking, okay, so you have this advice, and it really is that the last wine you make is what you're based on. There's a lot of truth to that, and I can understand that. So when you look back and you look at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
Oh, gosh, that I'm still doing it today. I think it really is, when I came to Etude, I was taking over for the founder who had really gained a lot of acclaim, Tony Soter. I mean, he's an icon in the industry, and that was a lot of weight on my shoulders, to really go like, well, here you go, kid. And, really to, gain his respect and to keep Etude going with the stature that we have been able to maintain and grow is something that I can really be proud of.
So complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
Breakfast.
Wait, you don't drink at breakfast?
That's not true. Yeah, there might be a mimosa. Yeah, I don't think. I think a wine without, it's sad. It's empty.
So, I'm going to test your brain again, how quick you can react here. But we're sitting at a table, and you've got a bottle of Etude wine, something you've worked very hard on. Who, from any walk of life, living or deceased, would you want to be sharing that bottle with?
Oh, I think it'd be my father. Yeah, we lost him a number of years ago, and he really hadn't had a chance to see me kind of come up in my career and, what we had done, and to share that bottle and talk about the commonality between architecture and winemaking and how we can kind of break it down that way, I think would be special.
And get the approval of you built a good wine.
Yeah.
You designed and built a very well-structured wine.
Exactly, yeah. It has design and beauty.
So you were talking about climate change and mentioned before that, maybe Cabernet and Napa won't be a fit in 30 years. We don't know. But where do you think we'll be in, 200, 300 years? Do you think we'll still be drinking wine?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, wine is going to be, it's intrinsic to our culture and many cultures, not just ours. I mean, we will find a way to be able to express, the soil, the land, everything in a bottle of wine. There's no doubt that'll happen. It absolutely will evolve. It'll change, and maybe, the locations and geographies will change. Maybe even some winemaking techniques along the way. 300 years is a long way.
That's true.
But Burgundy has going on 900 years experience, just in that one particular region. So, yeah, maybe we'll just get better at it too.
Very true. So, if you were, if unfortunately that didn't happen and you were sent to outer space or a deserted island at this point, what 3 wines would you want to take with you?
Oh boy. I think one of them would be a Paul Barra Special Club Champagne. Love that wine. Absolutely love that wine. I'd have to take a Burgundy, so it would probably have to be, I think that would be, let me see, a Roumier or, probably Les Amoureux, probably that. And then I'd have to have a white wine. I'd probably take an Etude Pinot Gris. I love that wine.
Love that. And why not take your own wine?
Yeah.
You worked hard on it. So I'm curious. We play a little game. I don't know if I warned you about this at the beginning, but wine soundtrack, wine and soundtrack, music had to come in somehow. So, so often wine and music are paired together in some way. Either we will listen to music while we're drinking wine or, some people say that it affects the flavor of the wine. So I'm curious, I'm going to name a couple of your wines, or a couple of wines we've spoken about. If you can tell me what you would want to be listening to, or what it makes you think of. It could be a genre, or you can go very specific into a song or artist, but don't stress. Let's start. You said that what you would welcome aliens with is your Pinot Gris. So let's start with your Pinot Gris.
Okay, well, the Pinot Gris, I think that it has to be something with violins, because I want that acidity and the minerality to be that, like pulling the bow across the strings. Very taut, but also bringing this sound and rhythm. So it's gonna be violins there. Yeah.
Ooh, I love that. Ooh, I can visualize it. In fact, let's do your Pinot Noir now. I have in the glass your Carneros Pinot. Mm-hmm. So tell me about this wine.
Oh gosh, this is a little bit bolder. This is going to be some kind of more modern, classical. There's going to be some Debussy is here, because there's a warmth to the sound, but it flows, and there's a rhythm, and it glides.
And then you said that you also make Cabernet. So let's talk about one of your Cabernets.
Okay, boy, that's a good one. Yeah, Cabernet and music. That's a little bit more punchy, a little bit more, you have to have more going on there. That's going to be a little bit more Miles Davis. There's still there's an elegance to our Cabernet. I really do think there is, but there's a stateliness too.
And last but not least, as a champagne lover, as a sparkling wine lover, you chose sparkling wine over still wine, red, white, rosé, whatever. You're making a sparkling wine. Pair your Etude sparkling wine with music.
Oh gosh, these are good questions. And I haven't really thought about these before. So boy, that's going to be. Oh boy, I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. Yeah, that's going to be a little bit more. She's more of a diva. Yeah, so it's going to maybe a little Diana Washington, probably. Ooh. Yeah.
You saved it. You figured it out. John, we are almost finished. I've got one more. Okay. It's a two-part question for you. So the first part of the question is, where in the world is on your bucket list to travel next? Wine-related. What wine region?
Sicily. Yeah, I've not been, and I've just fallen in love with Mount Etna wines, and I can't wait to get down there and explore it and get to know winemakers and really dig into it.
I love it. And for those who their bucket list is to come visit Northern California, how can they visit Etude? Where can they find you? And what can they find when they do find you?
So we're in the front door of Napa Valley. It's great. We're in the Carneros. So as you're coming up to the valley, you're going to hit Etude before you really get into the town of Napa. So we're off of Cuttings Wharf Road, right in southern part of the valley. We're open 7 days a week. We have a wonderful tasting room with a number of different tasting experiences, private tutored tastings, or just go have a nice glass out on the patio. And get out of the crowds of the valley and come down and just have a peaceful, relaxing time in Carneros.
Fantastic. And your website address is?
etudewines.com.
So simple. John, thank you so much for joining us on Wine Soundtrack, and thanks for sharing your story, and cheers.
Cheers. That was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.